There are few human emotions as universal as love. No matter the time or place, virtually every person who's ever existed knows what it's like to experience it, even if it wasn't always returned. For those facing this unique kind of loneliness, a simple answer often presented itself in the form of love magic. Spells, potions, amulets, talismans, all of these were available to people in antiquity, medieval times, the Renaissance, and beyond. You can even still get them today, now with free shipping or same-day delivery. But what were the love spells of antiquity? How were they used, and what was needed to make them happen? That's what I'll be looking at today, though I don't suggest you try any of these at home, no matter how lonely you are. You'll see why that is soon enough. Perhaps unsurprisingly, most love magic throughout history was created for men, and usually for more lustful than loving purposes. Forceful language was often used to coerce the woman to come to him, sometimes making her abandon her current partner to do so. The oldest known examples of love magic were found on cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia. One such tablet, dating to around 2300 BC, is inscribed with a spell to make a woman fall in love with a man. It reads in part, "I have seized your spittle-laden mouth. I have seized your colorful eyes. I have seized your urine-yielding vulva. I have seized your mouth so fit for love. By Ishtar and Ashara I conjure you. So long as his neck and your neck are not entwined, you shall not find peace." The exact pronouns and their directions aren't 100% clear, but the spell was probably written by a sorcerer for his male client, who was only mentioned indirectly near the end. The references to the woman's various orifices are to fluids that were likely used for the spell: saliva, tears, and urine, and the repeated use of the word seize indicates that they were probably not obtained with her consent, which leads to a bit of a problem with love magic in general. Forcing someone to love you via magic is, to use modern terms, akin to slipping them a roofie. I won't dwell too much on that aspect, but just keep it in mind as you learn about the extremes to which some people went to get a companion. Speaking of extremes, other Mesopotamian love magic is presented as a remedy for male impotence. Animals were often used in such rituals, sometimes their fluids, like saliva, sometimes their penises, and occasionally live animals. "At my head a buck is tied. At my feet a ram is tied. Buck caress me. Ram copulate with me. Prance about, wild bull. Let your strength rise for you." Believe it or not, this is actually the less explicit version of the text for this ritual. This didn't mean that the ancient Mesopotamians were into bestiality. Rather, the predictable sexual prowess of animals was seen as something to emulate, and invoking or witnessing it would hopefully cure the man of his ailment. When a woman sought aid from love magic, it was usually the kind that would help her keep her husband or lover, upon whom she depended for her livelihood, rather than a base desire for sex. In ancient Greece, this was known as philia magic, generally translated as friendship, and was used to solidify relationships. It could also be used by men on other men to secure friendly relations with equals or a political position under a male superior. This was different from eros magic, which was more sexual in nature and tended toward creating a relationship where there previously was none. The ancient Greeks were well aware of love magic in all its mythical forms. In the Iliad, Hera uses a magic belt to seduce her husband Zeus, while Jason used something called an ianx to win his wife Medea, which, if you know about Greek mythology, was a relationship that did not work out. Both of these charms were granted by the goddess of love Aphrodite, but these kinds of things weren't just limited to myths and legends. In my video about assassinations, I talked about a Greek slave girl who accidentally murdered her master, who was thinking of selling her to a brothel, by giving him too much of a love potion, which proved toxic. This was always a danger with magic potions of any kind, which could be beneficial in the proper doses, but harmful or lethal if overdone, a lesson that carries on into modern drug use. In one odd case, a spell was written for parents who wanted their unmarried daughter to secure a husband. "Yoke them in marriage and in passion, as they live together for the whole time of their lives. Grant that he, like a slave, be subordinated to her as he lusts for her, desiring to hold as his life mate no other woman or maiden, but Domitiana alone for all their lives." That's not to say that Greek men didn't use more coercive kinds of eros magic. The Acanthos curse tablet from the 4th century BC names a man called Pausanias, who casts a spell to bind a woman named Sime to do whatever he wants, and for good measure cuts her off from being able to perform sacrifices to Athena until she embraces him. And of course, some love spells sought to create same-sex relationships. This image shows a love spell from the 2nd century meant to bind one woman, Serapius, to another, Heraeus, while one from the 6th or 7th century curses Phlo, son of Mare, until he subjects himself to the affection of one Apopolo, son of Nue. These spells were discovered in the last century or two, and suffice it to say, the attitudes regarding them have changed dramatically. Richard Wunsch argued that Heraeus, far from trying to attract Serapius, was in fact cursing her, and more that she herself was actually dead, having also been the victim of a curse spell. In the case of Apopolo's spell to attract Phlo, the original editor Paul Smither, writing in 1939, referred to the embarrassing identity of the sex charmer and charmed. In other spells not included here, the gender of one party had been modified by editors to create heterosexual situations. A century ago, it was sometimes easier to assume a grammatical error and unintentional pronouns, often connected with unusual names, than it was to understand the situation involved. In medieval Christian Europe, magic was forbidden and sexuality was largely kept under wraps. Despite that, there's plenty of evidence that love spells were widely known, and in some cases practiced, throughout the era. The notorious Malleus Maleficarum places much of the blame for the plague of love magic on women and their, quote, carnal lust, which is insatiable. But there's no evidence to indicate that women were any more or less likely than men to use love magic in that era. Just like in ancient times, men were willing to go to extremes to arrange a hookup with the source of their desire, as the following account from a medieval churchman relates. Jacques de Vitry tells of a young man who was hopelessly in love with a girl who would have nothing to do with him. In desperation, the youth turned for help to a certain old woman, who concocted a clever plan. First, she told the would-be lover to pretend to be gravely ill. Then she fed mustard seed to her little dog to make the animal shed tears, and brought it to the maiden in question, telling her that the animal had once been a woman who had allowed a suitor to die for the love of her, adding ominously that the girl had been turned into a dog by magical spells, which God permitted on account of her sin. To avoid such a fate, the girl accepted the young man as her lover. While not technically involving any magic, this account shows how potent a belief in magic could be for the average person, and sort of pulls the curtain aside to show how a magician might have convinced someone of the efficacy of his or her powers. Contrary to what you might think, an interest in love or sex magic was sometimes displayed out in the open. Badges worn by medieval Christian pilgrims have been found in rivers. They were thought to have been discarded deliberately as thanks for a safe journey. In many of the same locations can be found the so-called profane badges, which aren't the kinds of things you would expect upstanding medieval religious folks to go around wearing, yet they existed nevertheless. They might have also been used for protection, or as curatives against conditions like impotence or infertility, or to try and enhance the sexuality of the bearer. In the Arabic world, books like the Pacatrix gave detailed instructions on how to create talismans that would secure love or break up existing couples, while in Japan, you could get an amulet known as an Enmusubi Onomori to enhance your chances at love or romance, or just better relationships at home or the workplace in general, much like the philia magic of ancient Greece. There's never been a shortage of magic spells or items, or outright trickery that people have used to find love, but the truly enterprising wouldn't have relied on someone else to perform the magic for them. They would have done it themselves. Most people wouldn't consider themselves to be wizards capable of casting spells or crafting magical items, but a few of us are pretty handy in the kitchen. So if you're looking for love, maybe you'd be better off preparing something your target can eat or drink. A wide array of ingredients was suggested for love potions, and they were often unsavory to say the least, and sometimes outright poisonous. But hey, if you want to find true love, you have to suffer a little. Menstrual blood was a common ingredient in love potions, and other things, as you'll soon see. Animals and animal parts, such as earthworms, lizards, and insects, most famously in the well-known concoction Spanish fly, have long been used as ingredients in aphrodisiacs and love potions. Unfortunately, not everyone limited their potion ingredients to animal parts. One medieval potion required the spleen and bone marrow of a murdered boy. In a chilly modern parallel, a New Jersey man killed and decapitated a 13-year-old boy in 1956, claiming that he needed the boy's skull for a love potion. If potions aren't your thing, and after hearing that I don't blame you, then how about a love cake? Surely this can't be as revolting as the potions, can it? In the Middle Ages, and probably occasionally at the present time, a girl would bake a love cake to be given to the lover whom she desired to secure as a husband. To bake this cake, the girl had to be naked. She touched the dough to her breasts, armpits, genitals, etc., so that it might absorb some of her sweat, which was supposed to convert the cake into a most powerful love charm. Or she took the bloody napkins which she wore while menstruating and burnt them to ashes, of which she mixed some with the dough for the cake. If you want something a little simpler and less horrifying, one spell says you can write magical characters on an apple and then give it to the object of your affection to eat. Great advice, unless your prospective mate is a doctor. Author and historian Richard Kiekefer called medieval magic the intersection between religion and science. He discussed how religious rituals often call upon divine powers, which could be interpreted as a kind of summoning magic, while magic rituals often evoke God or had complex formulas or instructions to follow, similar to how we would view modern science. Love magic in particular blurs the borders between reality and fantasy. Some substances can induce feelings of arousal or affection, which is scientific fact, but there are limits to how far they can go. The gap between that and the desired effect of true love is often filled in by magic, or at least a belief in magic. I don't remember it exactly, but I do recall hearing a story about a man taking a potion to make him seem more attractive, when it was really just a placebo that made him think he was more handsome and boosted his confidence, and that helped him win the girl. No potion or spell or charm could ever actually make one person instantly fall in love with another, but maybe the belief that they would was enough to power the fantasy, and at least occasionally the magic worked in a way, if only because the subject believed it would. I'm not saying everyone can just be more confident and instantly find love, but at the very least you don't need magic to do it. So leave the spells and potions in the history books and the seedy side of Etsy, and do the best you can with what you've got. It's better that way. Thank you so much for watching my video about love magic. As always, feel free to like or subscribe if you enjoyed it, and leave me a comment letting me know what you thought or if you have a suggestion for future videos. Until next time, may you never go looking for love at the bottom of a bottle, whether it's a beer or a magic potion.